Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. For this tutorial, I'm going to show you how I made this boho inspired stenciled cake that featured some wafer paper feathers, which I show you how to do. I do not show you how I made these palm fronds, but I will add a link to show you where I have made those before. And so the main thing on this cake is going to be the stenciling and how I made the feathers. So we are going to start with those feathers because I wanted them to set aside and dry out while I was doing the rest of the cake. So what I'm doing here is I am just sketching out the basic shape of a feather. Now you could find some templates online. If you just Google feather shapes, printable feather shapes, you should be able to come up with a few options. But I just eyeballed it and I did 3 different shapes and sizes, just to have some variation. This is just printer paper, and I'm just going to use this as my guide. I'm going to use 0 grade wafer paper for the actual feathers themselves. I'm just cutting out this template. So just line up 2 pieces of wafer paper on top of each other and use this as a template to cut the same sizes and shapes out of the wafer paper. I don't show you how I'm all 3 of them, but you get the idea by showing you these 2. The third one is basically the same as the first one, just a little bit different size. So I'm just using some floral wire and I am attaching them with some wafer paper glue. And then just stack one on either side of that wire, and that wire is going to be basically the spine of the feather. Now I should have brought it up a little bit closer to the tip of the feather, but that's okay. I went back in and I glued that together in the middle just to help it keep its shape. And you'll see where when I added the motion into these feathers, where they kind of peeled away from each other, but I did go back and reattach those just with a little bit more wafer paper glue. And I'm cutting these slits all the way on both sides, and I'm kind of cutting them at an angle, at an arch, to kind of give them more of a realistic look. There you can kind of see how they look. And do that all along all of your feathers. Tapering up towards the tip. And then I went back in and on a few here and there, kind of staggered, I went ahead and rounded out some of those edges, softened up some of those edges, because you know how like a feather has kind of some separation between the feathers sometimes. It gives a little bit more movement to it. Now what I'm using is my clothing steamer that you can find these anywhere online. You can find them at Walmart. And I hold it away from the steamer quite a bit because you don't want this wafer paper to get too wet. You just want it to kind of start bending a little bit to give some separation of those feathers. And you see I used my Dresden tool just in between the layers of the wafer paper to separate them a little bit. Otherwise they will stick together. And you just kind of see how the feathers start to kind of curl up on themselves a little bit. You can do that as much as you want. You can add more curling if you want. I didn't want to go too far with it, but I wanted to have some movement in it. And you could do as many layers of this wafer paper as you want. You can do a 3rd layer. It just kind of gives it an all over kind of more rounded shape. And I wanted these more flat with some movement in the feathers. And then I used that spine, that wire, and kind of bent it a little bit to give them some movement that way too. You don't have to do that. It just depends on the look that you're going for. And I wanted movement. I'm always going for movement in my cakes. I don't know why. I think it just adds some interest, personally. Now I have my pre-crumb coated cake. This was a 6-inch cake, I believe 4 layers. That's kind of my standard. My go-to is 4 layers of cake with a filling in between each layer. And I use my white American buttercream, which I always attach a link in the description box and on the iCard if I remember. I try really hard. Sometimes I'm human, I forget. But if I do forget, just send me a message and I will get you that attachment if I do forget. And I'm just using some navy blue buttercream with a small spatula. This is like an artist palette knife is what that is. And just kind of splotching it on. No rhyme or reason to it. No pattern. I just wanted it random. And then just using my scraper to remove the excess and to kind of thin it out and give it a little bit of wispiness. And I don't mind if there's a little overflow of some of that residue of the of the buttercream that's left on the spatula or on the scraper. That's fine. That didn't bother me at all. Otherwise, I don't want it to look like cow print, you know? I wanted it to look more artistic than that. And then I continued it on to the top also. And I have this little stencil. This I found in, what was it? The clay section of one of my local craft stores. We have 3 of them here, thank goodness. It's a smaller stencil, which I really like because I didn't want to do it all the way around. And it was a pattern that I have not found online yet. This was a new pattern to me, and I thought it was really pretty. So I'm just using buttercream to do the stencil with, and I just thinned down my buttercream to about a peanut butter consistency to make it easier to get that stencil on there. And you'll notice I am applying the buttercream with an upward motion vertically because you go by the pattern. That pattern has more of a vertical movement to it. If you do it against the grain, so to speak, you have more chance of pushing that buttercream underneath the stencil where you don't want it. Just a little helpful hint there. And I'm attaching my edible gold leaf. This leaf, for some reason, just was very movable. Sometimes you'll find that it sticks to the backing and you can't get it on your cake. This time it wanted to come right off the backing and stuck right to my fingers. So it actually kind of made it easier to transfer it onto the cake. And my cake has a little bit of condensation on it because I do place it in my freezer for 10 minutes approximately in between each step of the process here. So when it's been out of the freezer for a couple minutes, there's a little bit of condensation on it, which makes it much easier to attach this gold leaf. If you don't have condensation, then you can just go ahead and add a little bit of water. It sticks to water just fine. And use a fluffy brush. If your leaf is acting normal, which mine is not, a fluffy brush helps you transfer it onto the cake. And then I'm just using my fans, my palm fronds, whatever you want to call them, onto the cake. I did make those out of paper, regular paper. You can make them out of wafer paper if you like. I just wanted to get that deep navy, and scares me a little bit to add too much color to my wafer paper because I don't want to warp it too much, especially for that type of application. I need to play around with it a little bit more when it comes to adding color to my wafer paper. I know you can. It might not be that deep. You might have to look online to buy already made colored wafer paper. You might be able to find something like that. I haven't Google searched that yet. I just haven't needed to yet, but maybe it's time. And then I'm just placing these feathers on the cake. You know what? It kind of reminds me of a headdress, a Native American headdress. I think that's really cool. But that's what I felt like added the boho aspect to it. That and the spears, the palm fronds, the flags, whatever you call them. I've heard them called so many things. And then I'm just adding some gold luster dust coated macarons. You can do that with any of your macarons. You can just use a fluffy brush and brush that luster right on there. Whatever color of luster you want. I always go with gold typically, but you could use silver, you could use rose gold. It sticks really well, especially if they're coming out of the refrigerator. Just like with the cake, there might be a little bit of condensation, and that helps that stick right to it. And then I just added some touch of a pale pink with the floral to go along with that other spear, just to kind of work it all together. And I'm attaching these decorations with some buttercream. And just add them where you think they need to go. So there you go, guys. My stenciled cake with the boho inspired feathers and the palm fronds and a few other random decorating elements. I hope you liked it, and I hope you give it a try. And if you do, please tag me on Instagram if you post anything, because I love to see the work that you guys do. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch my video. And if you'd like to watch some other videos, go ahead and click on the link to one of these other videos shown here. And if you would like to check out my other social media, I am on Facebook and Instagram under the same name, Sophisticakes by Mary. And please take the time to share, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you know when I upload another video. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you on the next tutorial.